Hi, I'm Jermaine Malcolm,
And I'm Sophia Malcolm.
and we are part of the Faith Church team. If you're watching this video, then you're probably approaching one of the most significant days in your life, baptism. It is truly an incredible time. What do you think, honey?
It's by far one of the biggest decisions that you're going to make in your whole entire life, so yay!
As you get closer to the day, you might have already passed it, but you have questions. And so in this short video, we hope to address some of those questions, those primary questions that you might have. And if we don't answer everything, you can always find us. Don't hesitate to come up and start a conversation. Who gets baptized? In 1 Peter 3:21, it says, "And the water symbolizes baptism, and now saves you also, not the removal of dirt from the body, but pledge of a clear conscience towards God." It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So, although not explicitly expressed, many people believe that prior to being baptized, one must completely figure it out as a Christian before making this public commitment. Because of what Jesus has done on the cross, we can pledge a clear conscience towards God. This is not possible without the sacrifice that Jesus made. Baptism is a public sign that you identify completely with what Jesus has done for you. Why should I be baptized? Let's go back to the Great Commission. Jesus says, if you're to be my followers, you must identify with me, right? So let's break it down a little bit. Let's look at that Great Commission. What is it?
Well, first of all, Jesus commands us to be baptized. And not only that, he gave us an example because he himself got baptized. And in Ephesians 4 verse 4 to 6 says, "For there is one body, one spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father, who is over all and in all and living through all."
So there's two parts right there to catch in that question, why should I be baptized? One, it's a charge. Jesus asked us to do it, and he did it himself, right? And the next thing is for us to be one. We are a family. We are one. We're identifying as believers of Christ. What does it mean? Now you've decided, you've committed yourself towards taking that step. What does it mean for your life? See, baptism is not about salvation or going to heaven. It's about being obedient to God.
Take, for instance, the thief on the cross that was being crucified with Christ. And after he surrendered his life to Jesus, Jesus said, "Today, on this day, you will be with me in eternity." And obviously we know that he didn't get baptized, but it's about being obedient and being willing to be crucified with Christ. In Romans 6, verses 4 to 6 says, "For we died and were buried with Christ by baptism, and just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glorious power of the Father, now we also may live new lives." So baptism is about the death and dying with Christ, being able to identify that we are living the life that he lived, and be willing to do that sacrificially.
That's awesome. How about verse 14?
Verse 14 says, "Sin is no longer your master, for you no longer live under the requirements of the law. Instead, you live under the freedom of God's grace."
How incredible is that? Like, think about that. Now you have not only made this commitment towards Christ, but you're also doing this publicly. And you're doing this, again, in that body of one that we spoke about earlier. You're a part of a big family now. And we want to be able to do that together.
And finally, it says, "Now you are free from your slavery to sin. You have become slave to righteous living." Because we are going to be slaves of whomever we worship, whomever we desire to serve. And so whenever we are being baptized, we are saying that we're no longer identifying ourselves with our sinful nature. Now we are being committed to our spiritual nature, and we are identifying ourselves with Christ so we can live in a way to be spiritually pleasing or righteous towards God.
I believe you had some examples on symbolizing this through marriage somehow?
Yeah, so as I was thinking about this baptism thing, I started thinking about it as baptism and marriage. Baptism to me correlates with marriage. When you think about these three questions, why should I get baptized? Who should get baptized? Or what does it mean to get baptized? And then think about it in marriage. Why should I get married? Or who gets married? The person who has fallen in love get married. We don't live in a country where we get arranged marriages, but we live in a country where we have that freedom to choose whomever we want to get married to. And usually we get to know that person first, so we decide for ourselves to fall in love with that person. So the person who is in love gets married. The person who is in love with Christ gets baptized. And we think about it, why should I get baptized? Because it is... You think about, why should I get baptized or why should I get married? You're deciding, okay, I've fallen in love with this person. Now I want to separate myself onto this particular one person. Same thing with baptism. Why should I get baptized? Because now I want to separate myself onto Christ for himself. I want to belong. I want to be the only person that belongs to him. Same thing with marriage. And finally, what does marriage mean? What does baptism mean? We know that for those of us who are married, we know that marriage is about sacrifice, right? We know that marriage is about commitment. And finally, we know that marriage is unto death. Same thing with baptism. Whenever we get baptized, we know that when we are committed to Christ, we are going to sacrifice our life now, our desires to him. And we're not just doing it, we are doing it unto death. So we are committing our whole entire life to follow Christ. And finally, after all of that, everything that we know that marriage is a ceremony, right? On that wedding day, it's that public declaration that, okay, we know I've fallen in love with this person. I've learned about him. I've decided to commit myself to him. So that ceremony is that public declaration to say that everybody that I've invited, you hold me accountable to live and to separate myself to this one particular person. That's what baptism is. The baptism is that ceremony to say that, hey, I have fallen in love with Jesus and I have decided for myself with my knowledge and my understanding that I've decided to separate myself unto him. And you can hold me accountable for that. You can decide that if you see me doing something that is not of Christ, you can say, hey, what are you doing? I thought you got baptized and separated yourself onto that. Same thing with marriage. If you see me doing something that is not with my husband, you can question me, especially if you were there as a witness. So that's how I can correlate marriage and baptism.
That's great. That's great. And you mentioned the part about being in love with that person. I just want to say this too, right? That we know that it's not going to be all roses, butterflies, and candy all the time, just like marriage. But what love is about, and Christ's example of love has always been about action, taking action. So now that you're baptized, right, you've made that commitment. But more importantly, each day it's about you taking that step to love Christ deeper and deeper, just how he's commanded you to do so. So we are incredibly excited about your journey. And as always, we're open to have more conversations about this. We love y'all, and we can't wait to see what happens next.